Anything can happen at WrestleMania. Oftentimes, we're treated to dream matches that we never thought would take place. Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant, The Rock versus Hulk Hogan, Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar. But there are quite a few interesting matches that were on the drawing board that were never quite able to take place for one reason or another. I'm Senior Siete for 7 Wrestling, and let's take a look at 7 huge WrestleMania matches that almost happened. Now, before we get into this, we appreciate your support, so if you enjoy this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and figure 4 leg lock that notification bell. Number 1, Hulk Hogan vs. Ric Flair, WrestleMania 8. Let's start off with an easy one. This one was actually announced, and yes, this match did happen several times over the years. Several times, many times, but the first time was gonna be special. Hulk Hogan vs. Ric Flair was the dream match of the 80s. Hulk Hogan was the king of the rock and wrestling WWE, while the Nature Boy Ric Flair was the dominant champion from the top rival, the National Wrestling Alliance. It was a wrestling fan's dream match that was never going to happen, as neither guy seemed likely to make the jump to the competitor. But then, WCW decided to get younger and didn't want to renew Ric Flair's contract. And since Ric Flair had paid a deposit on the NWA World title and they weren't quick to return it, he showed up on WWE TV with the NWA World Heavyweight title. This was an insanely huge deal at the time, as in, imagine if Samoa Joe just showed up on Raw with the AEW World title. It only made sense to take their time building to the inevitable showdown between Flair and Hogan. To a lot of fans, the WWE was the only game in town, so they made it a point to adequately introduce Flair to the new audience. Flair would go on to win the 1992 Royal Rumble to win the vacant WWE World title, and a press conference was held to determine his opponent for WrestleMania. And to nobody's surprise, it was the Hulkster. Check it out, there was even a graphic. But, for whatever reason, the match was changed to Flair defending the title against Randy Savage and Hogan squaring off against Sid Justice. Some say it was because they had run the Hogan-Flair match on a house show loop in the fall and it didn't draw particularly well. Some say it was because Hogan was leaving the WWE for Hollywood. Whatever the reason, we still got a pretty great match in Savage vs. Flair, and a pretty cool WrestleMania moment when the Ultimate Warrior made his long-awaited return to save Hulk Hogan. But to say it wouldn't draw wasn't accurate, as WCW had their biggest buy rate to date when they'd run Hogan vs. Flair as the main event a few years later. Number 2, Shawn Michaels vs. Eddie Guerrero, WrestleMania 22. Some wrestlers are great at promos, some guys are great in the ring, and some people have insane charisma, and a small handful check every single box. Shawn Michaels and Eddie Guerrero are 2 of those guys, and the story practically writes itself. 2 of professional wrestling's most beloved, talented in-ring performers who battled their personal demons just to return to the industry that they love. In 2005, Eddie was the hottest heel in wrestling, having just, let me check my notes, tried to steal custody of his friend's son. Yikes. And Shawn Michaels was one of the company's most beloved baby faces, enjoying a second half of his career that astonishingly was every bit as good as his first. So it made all the sense in the world for this duo to square off at WrestleMania 22. You can almost hear the internet salivating. But unfortunately, this entry is going to have a tragic ending. Eddie would pass away from a heart attack on November 13, 2005. When asked about the match, Shawn Michaels would say, "It would have been a blast to do. Where we were later on in our careers, we probably would have argued about who was putting who over. Neither one of us would have had a problem, that's for sure. It would have been an honor to put Eddie Guerrero over. And it would have been an honor for all of us to watch it." Michaels would go on to face Vince McMahon at WrestleMania 22 in a match that doesn't quite hold up to the Mania classics that HBK had been putting on at that time, but at least it gave us this insane moment. Number 3, Shawn Michaels vs. Bret Hart 2, WrestleMania 13. This one isn't much of a surprise. Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart were 2 of the biggest names in the company, and people were dying to see them get back into the ring together after their controversial WrestleMania 12 Iron Man match. And they were headed in that direction as soon as that year's Royal Rumble, with Steve Austin winning the WrestleMania title match in a very controversial fashion. Austin snuck back into the ring after being eliminated by Bret Hart, and then proceeded to toss Vader, The Undertaker, and Hart himself. This was going to lead to the Final 4 pay-per-view, where the quartet were going to square off in what would today be known as a Fatal 4-Way Elimination match to determine who was going to WrestleMania to face Michaels for the title. But then, HBK went and lost his smile. I mean, not literally, that's the excuse he used. It isn't very clear what actually happened, but Michaels would forfeit the belt for a variety of reasons. An injury, drugs, not wanting to lose to Bret Hart at WrestleMania. The truth is probably all of the above. At any rate, the title would be up for grabs in that Final Four match, which Bret Hart would go on to win. He'd lose the title to Sid the very next night, and Mania would become a double main event, with Sid defending the title against The Undertaker, and Bret facing Austin in an I Quit match. The I Quit match would go on to become one of the best bouts in WrestleMania history. It propelled Steve Austin to become the man to lead professional wrestling into its next boom period. And the Sid Undertaker match is famous because, there was a rumor that Sid pooped his pants. However, we couldn't find any proof of the pooping. And before we move on, the WrestleMania 13 Hart vs. Michaels rematch actually had a finish. In a shoot interview, Bret would describe a stunt that was approved by both Michaels and McMahon, where Shawn would go for a super kick, Bret would catch his foot and break his ankle. They even had a gimmicked boot and would have a snapping sound come from under the ring. Shawn would then be forced to tap out and Bret would win the title. From there, Shawn would take some time off to heal, then return at SummerSlam where he would defeat Bret for the belt, and they'd go on to be tag team buddies. That's a little different than what we ended up with. Number 4, Hulk Hogan vs. Steve Austin, WrestleMania X8. It could have been the biggest match of all time. The leader of the Rock and Wrestling 80s squaring off against the man who ushered in the Attitude Era, the Immortal One versus the Texas Rattlesnake, the leader of the NWO versus the toughest SOB in the WWE, but it never happened, and it very well could have. Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall returned to the WWE in 2002 just in time for the build to WrestleMania X8, or, that's WrestleMania 18 if you're a sane person. And apparently, the WWE higher-ups realized if there was ever going to be a time for the Austin-Hogan Dream match, it was now. McMahon wanted it, Hogan wanted it, and Steve Austin did not. Officially, Austin would say that he was worried that the bout couldn't possibly live up to the hype, and that he and Hogan weren't capable of putting on the kind of match that would deliver, which is questionable, considering the match Hogan did have is considered an all-time great. Over the years, other rumors have floated as to why we didn't get the match, including Austin holding a grudge because Hogan wouldn't work with him back when they were both in WCW. Also, Austin may have been concerned that the notoriously pro-Hogan Toronto crowd would turn Hogan into the de facto babyface. Okay, that last one might hold some water because that's literally exactly what happened to The Rock. In the end, Austin would go on to face Scott Hall in a singles match that was unremarkable, aside from one of the most hilarious stunners ever, and The Rock and Hogan would go on to have one of the most memorable matches in WrestleMania history. And the closest we ever got to Hogan versus Austin was a strange handicap that happened on a Raw episode leading up to WrestleMania. Weird. Number 5, Hulk Hogan versus Mike Tyson, WrestleMania 6. Okay, take this one with all of the salt you can possibly gather, but there is strong evidence to suggest that the WrestleMania 6 main event was slated to be Hulk Hogan against the boxing heavyweight champion of the world, Iron Mike Tyson. Back in the fall of 1989, there wasn't a clear direction leading into WrestleMania 6. Hulk Hogan had soundly defeated his Mega Powers buddy Randy Savage on the house show loop, his newest contender, Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig, wasn't drawing, and his weird pseudo-feud with his no-holds-barred co-star Zeus wasn't quite going to cut it for a WrestleMania main event. So, to hear Hulk Hogan tell it, and yes, we know his record for truthfulness isn't the best, Vince McMahon was trying to lure Iron Mike into a boxer versus wrestler match at that year's Mania. And it kind of makes sense. Mike Tyson was going to be the special enforced referee for a main event match on NBC between Hogan and Savage. From there, it's not hard to imagine this setting off what would have been a huge match at the time, a match that would have easily filled Toronto Sky Dome. But whatever was planned collapsed when Tyson was knocked out by 42-1 long shot James Buster Douglas in the Tokyo Dome. Douglas would go on to take the referee spot and just leave it at that. Nobody was going to pay to see this guy take on Hogan at WrestleMania. Why do we believe it? Well, there's a history of wrestler-boxer matches, and Tyson is obviously a big wrestling fan. Why don't we believe it? Well, they were already building to Hogan versus Warrior at that point, but that could have been a backup in case Tyson flaked or got knocked the fuck out. There is an interesting side note to this in the build-up to WrestleMania X7. It took them a long time to announce a match for their then top-heeled Triple H. Apparently, two of the options were none other than Hulk Hogan and Iron Mike Tyson. Number 6, The Rock versus Brock Lesnar, WrestleMania 30. This would have been a big one. Heading into his WrestleMania 29 title defense against John Cena, The Rock was already one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, and Brock Lesnar was less than a year into his return to WWE and still had clout from his MMA run. So it made all the sense in the world to have this duo run back their amazing SummerSlam 2002 match at the following year's WrestleMania. But then WrestleMania 29 happened, where in the main event, The Rock would proceed to tear his abdominal and abductor muscles and suffer a hernia. This caused a chain reaction that tore his abdomen wall. Ouch. Also, ew. As you'd imagine, this would cause a serious problem for his acting career, as an enormous film crew was in Budapest preparing to shoot his next movie, Hercules. No, not that Hercules. And if you wonder why The Rock doesn't wrestle more frequently, well, there you have it. It was very expensive to delay filming. Instead, at WrestleMania 30, The Rock would participate in a very entertaining segment with Steve Austin and Hulk Hogan at the Superdome, and Brock Lesnar would go on to break pro wrestling's most celebrated winning streak and give us the greatest wrestling meme of all time. Number 7. Chris Jericho vs. Mickey Rourke, WrestleMania 25. Did you see The Wrestler? The 2008 movie in which Mickey Rourke was nominated for an Academy Award for playing professional wrestler Randy the Ram Robinson? If not, pause this video and go check it out. It's an amazing look at a down-on-his-luck wrestler who has to learn with life outside of the limelight. We'll wait. Okay, welcome back. It was awesome, right? The movie is credited with bringing Mickey Rourke back to the mainstream, even though that only lasted for a movie or two. But believe us, during the 2009 awards season, he was the guy. And apparently, the WWE had him lined up to face Chris Jericho at WrestleMania 25. Imagine it. A method actor who had spent time training with WWE Hall of Famer Afa Anawahi, who was nominated for Academy Award. It would have been huge. And the ball was already rolling when Rourke called Chris Jericho out on the SAG Awards red carpet. The duo even faced off on an episode of Larry King Live, but apparently Rourke's representation got cold feet and were worried that being associated with WWE would cost him his Academy Award. So instead, Jericho ended up in a weird handicap match against legends Jimmy Snuka, Roddy Piper, and Ricky Steamboat. In the end, Rourke didn't win his Academy Award, but at least we were treated to what was a very fun Ricky Steamboat renaissance, and Rourke got to knock Jericho out. Well, there's our list. Did we forget any other mega WrestleMania matches that never happened? If so, please leave them in the comments section below. Also, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop that notification bell. Until next time, I'm Senior Siete for Savin Wrestling saying bye-bye.